So a warm welcome to the live studio broadcast of the Supply Chain Conference 2022. A warm welcome for all of you who might be joining us now. We've already had the first session of the conference. We dived into all aspects of supply chain, of trends, of the new economy, of how really we're starting to mimic nature and the ecosystem of nature and implementing it into our daily lives, into our industries, and also into supply chain. We're now going to dive into a panel and talk even more about how we can realize and really integrate sustainability into the supply chain. But first, let's look at the poll that I asked just to get a temperature of where you're all at before the break. And the poll was, have you already or are you planning to invest in technology to handle disruption coming from sustainability? So let's see if yes or no. What is the overweighing answer? Can we pull the poll there and see what the result was? Oh, I would say that is quite as even as you can get. So 52% of you have or are planning to invest in technology to handle the disruption of sustainability integration, and 48% of you are not. So I hope that we can actually adjust this to a yes after our panel. So with that, it's time for me to introduce our panelists. Some of you are already well-known faces because we saw you in the first section. We have Märtha. Thank you for joining us. And Märtha Rehnberg, your co-founder of Dare Disrupt.
Correct.
And then, of course, we have you, Peter Hersseldahl, editor and journalist at Monday Morgan. And then we have Sari, Hilden, you're head of transformation and development at Posti, which is a Finnish delivery company. So you're really coming from sort of the supply chain aspect. And then probably a familiar face, we, of course, have Jens Stenquist, your VP of sales and marketing at Optilon. So I thought I would sort of open up this by maybe starting to address you, Jens, and also Sari, to sort of maybe have some reflections about the presentations from Märtha and Peter, because it really set a context that I think is a great way to navigate through our panel also about, how do we really get sustainability into the supply chain. So Jens, any reflections?
No, I think extremely inspiring, first of all. But also, there were good wordings about moving this to more into nature way of thinking and so forth. But still on the same side, since I'm working with clients in the real situation, I think you need to be aware of also the timetable here. So, okay, what do we address now? For me, we're addressing a future, a way moving forward. But what do we do now? Well, we cannot go directly to local supply chains. That is not possible in all cases. So we need to think a little bit about what to act on now based on where we are, because we can do a lot. And what are we heading for?
And I have the similar kind of expression that hearing this, what we can, where we are targeting to, but turning that into the daily actions, what we can do today, and moving towards these great ambitious targets, which we really need to do.
And I think that could be sort of a good conduit for our conversation. It's sort of maybe looking at practical hands-on, what we can do today, but also having at the same time the vision of where we actually want to navigate to. And every time change comes in new lingo, it's always difficult to apprehend and feel like, we're here, we need to have this crisis. We don't have time to implement something new. So I would say, Sari, if I start with you. So Posti, you're a Finnish delivery company. So that also means that you're really into the framework of logistics with all that implies. Share with us some challenges that you're experiencing and how you've tackled them. And then also maybe tie into how you're also interweaving sustainability into that.
Yeah, so Posti being a kind of transporting company. We are transporting mail, we are transporting parcels, and then we are also doing this warehousing business so that we can automate and making it easier for people to move the stuff from place A to place B. So there's a lot of carbon footprint coming from the fleet that we are using for transportation. And of course, what we have done today is that we have purchased quite many electric vehicles, but of course we don't have many trucks to transport big things. And for that, in Finland, I don't know how many other countries have it, but we have a kind of a biodiesel in use, which is created, diesel oil created from recyclable stuff. And that is something that is reducing the footprint 90% from comparing to the normal diesel. So that is already inbuilt in our business, so that we are utilizing for the cars that need this diesel, that they can use this kind of my diesel, it's called, and that is reducing already with the fleet that we have. But of course, that is something that we have set the target for us, that being carbon neutral on 2030, and for that we need to renew still some of our vehicles. But that is a kind of concrete action that we can do already today, and then step by step renewing the other vehicles. So that's at least one concrete action that we have done.
And it's also an action that sort of spurs into the notion that innovation or, rethinking is so important to actually implement or do changes that become more feasible. Jens, out of your experiences, I mean, Optilon works with so many companies within the supply chain. What is the biggest challenge to date? And do you see that, are they tapping into this kind of
Absolutely.
strategy?
I would say, I mean, by listening to all of you, I think you should divide what's going on there at our client is mainly 3 work streams, you might say. The first work stream is the communication work stream. Okay, you are communicating towards what you are doing. That is, of course, building the brand of the company. Unfortunately, many times there is a gap between that communication versus what actually is going on and how good you actually are. But I mean, that is one work stream, and I think it's good because it inspires and it builds up the road, so to speak, forward. Secondly, you have a lot of projects going on, because I think everyone can tell us, okay, we are in a situation that no one really knows exactly what to do. So you need to try out different things. And it's important that to brand your project somehow as a sustainability project. We were talking about that in a pause here, because then you get the finance for it. And I think it's good. I mean, you are doing a lot of projects. Some will be successful, some will not. That's fact, right? But the later part, which I think is very important, is how do you then connect these sustainability issues into day-to-day business? Yeah. And there I see we are lacking a lot. We are stuck with a lot of traditional structure from an organizational perspective, accounting perspective, how to treat, handle, and monitor the company. And that's where I see the biggest challenge actually is how do we do this on a day-to-day business? So we automatically get it into the day-to-day life at the company.
And I guess that's probably also this bit of a stakeholder perspective, that it's not only, the company who needs to take action. There needs to be legislation, there needs to be incentives. So Märtha, I also know that you're currently working on evidence-based policymaking with the EU Commission on a new initiative, if I have it correctly, Knowledge for Policy, aimed at sort of closing the gap between research and policy. And I just wanted to highlight, because maybe that is that sort of a way forward. And also, you're also working with a lot of companies, also within the supply chain. Is it sort of the merge of all the stakeholders together, or how do we sort of get the wheel going?
I think one central element here is to always speak of and be quite vocal about when you're doing something for the status quo and the current sort of incremental innovation versus when you're doing it for disruptive. And when we come to science-based, on the one hand, it's about the compliance of your existing operations and your value chain. So inviting the climate scientist and following on the latest policies that are coming, so you're not too late when they're coming. And then there's the disruptive angle, where you invite the climate scientist and to the innovation room, and you say, okay, so if you were to price CO2, not policy, but if you were to price CO2, we know that the price of CO2 would have to go up at least 300%. That would incentivize disruptive innovation business models that are more digitalized, dematerialized. You can go on. A biodiversity science, how would you price the price of cement or steel? And so there's dual strategies here, and I think I see the clients that I advise a tendency to focus on the prior, right? Yeah. On the short term and the incremental stuff. And so we need to skew, and I'd love to see that 50-50 split, being 50 on the incremental investment and then 50 on the disrupt, and then that we are very vocal across the entire supply chain in organization and externally when we play with the one or the other strategy. And before I ask my next question, I just also want to say to our viewers, please do send in questions, because I will be bringing up John on stage to see if any of you have sent questions, because I can convey them, but it's really you who have the questions that are a necessity to answer.
So on one end we have the policy, we have the legislation, but then there's also this mind shift that needs to come about, because what we're used to doing is what we're also accustomed to keep on doing. So Peter, because you talk a lot about, you know, the fusion of technology, nature, and so forth. So what advice can leaders and companies tap into to sort of making this transition on a day-to-day basis? Maybe it's a totally different way of thinking than just, we have to implement sustainability. Maybe it's more, a broader perspective.
Yeah. I was just thinking about you're mentioning the time frame of this, and I was thinking, how about looking at something like Uber and the disruption of the really local transport? How quickly Uber managed to completely revolutionize, you know, who's a driver, what are the business models, what is the experience, how does the customer provide data by using the smartphones, and then extending it even to delivery of food and all kinds of goods, and the interesting shift that happened even during COVID, where now you have these ghost kitchens, which on the website looks like a proper restaurant, but actually you're ordering from a restaurant that is only supplying to takeaway food. I think what you're looking at is probably actors coming from outside your usual field, and somebody who has spare resources, who has a different understanding of technology. I mean, taxis were it's terrible. It was stuck in 50 years ago. You have to phone and all that stuff, and then suddenly somebody sees that the technology can mobilize and release some really small resources that suddenly become harnessed and become actually a very large force in the business. And I think I don't have the answer right now, but I think that if you are moving towards a circular business model where recycling, something like I think Märtha mentioned the idea that Adidas had with the Speed Factory, where the customer walks in, they have the measures taken, and then the foot, the shoe is 3D printed in the shop, so you get it a few hours later, and basically you can come back. Or you could, and get the stuff recycled. Or you can imagine an IKEA shop where you hand in your old furniture and they put it in the shredder and you get some new back. I think each of these technology opens new ways of ensuring what are the materials, what's actually going on, how do you transport it, how did the customer get there, what data needs to be kept in order to understand the material streams. But I think you should be inspired by something by Uber, but also you should be kept awake by the speed at which that disruption happened, because it's not necessarily short term. I think you will see elements of this coming in and very directly disrupting your business.
Jens, would you like to comment on that?
No, I think you're right in some extent here, Peter. And I mean, coming back to Uber, I think also, there are brilliant ideas out there. But I think you should also be aware of that these brilliant ideas are to be placed in an existing context. An existing context with tremendously amount of history, right? A context where you have people that need to change and shift their mindset. It's not just enough for the leaders saying that, or consultants saying that, or visionaries saying that. And I think that is the journey. How do you cope with that? And I think my conclusion, at least, or our conclusion, is that, okay, we must be aware that we're not living in a perfect world. So the movement is more important than the accuracy, I would say. So it's better to start doing things like talking about data here. Yeah. We know for sure, and Alice was referring to the scope 1, 2, 3 data. We know that scope 3 data is more or less impossible to find, to be frank. But start off designing the processes, the decision making, the teams, the boards, the stakeholders, as you were having the correct data. Start off in that area and do it based on hypothesis. Because once you have started off that journey, then it's easier when the data is collected and when data is coming, instead of just waiting and saying, no, this is not working. So I think that is the reality you have to face. Also, setting in the right context there is you have to be humble around it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Maybe you will need to find disruption from somebody who has nothing to lose.
Yes.
Because changing your business might be difficult, but I think starting up something that could then, one idea would be suppose some new product where you from the start design a new product to be recycled, where the actual logistics of collecting the material and keeping track of it is built into the design. If you can get the logistic thought into the circular design of a product, of course it has to be a major product to start out with. I think in that sense you're not disrupting anyone. You're not taking their job, but you're creating something in a place where nothing exists right now. And I think that it might be a much easier evolution.
So sort of taking that and putting it into practicality, because we have Posti here. It would be interesting to hear, from someone within the supply chain to sort of see, does, for example, utilizing the technology that we have at hand, really utilizing data, and then, you have the AI, you have the blockchain. Is this something that comes naturally, sort of in the evolvement, in stepping up, sustainability in the supply chain, but also the functionality, bearing the times we live in?
Yeah, definitely. And how it works, now going into the practicalities, how we have been setting this up is that, of course, this disruptive innovations, many times they come from small companies, but being a bigger company, you also can try to foster that mindset and get these ideas flowing in. And what we have said is that we have a kind of, in our strategy, it's a long-term vision where we want to go and where we want to be. But we have split that also into smaller steps. So what do we want to do during the next year in order to reach this vision? And what do we want to do in the next quarter? So they are all going hand in hand, but we kind of split it into smaller, tangible topics. And then when we have this kind of quarterly targets, we ask everyone at Posti to kind of think about, hey, how we can contribute on getting this target. And there can be coming these new ideas. It's not just kind of a disruptive necessarily, but they can be incremental ideas or anything that are contributing, getting us to the long-term vision. And then when we do these things in quarterly basis and we sit back and learn from them, and then gradually it is evolving on the right direction. So it's not destructive in the way, but there might also raise some really brilliant ideas to go ahead.
Learning by doing, in a sense.
And just to connect also, I think, Märtha, you was referring to that about the management, of the way you were breaking down governance, I think it was in the presentation, right? And I really like that one of small, fast loops, right? Feedback loops. It's extremely important in that game-changing or the shift. So I fully agree with you there, Sari, as well.
And it's such a leadership aspect here.
Exactly.
You have to incentivize this, both in culture, KPIs. It has to trickle down everywhere. And I think broadly when you work with disruption, there's broadly two groups of people that I see in the organization. I'm really generalizing, but you have one that is very hard skilled, right? Worked their entire life at this particular task in the supply chain. And you come there to talk about disruption, obviously they see, what's my role? 3D printing, totally new transformation of supply chains. So as a leader, you have to show the way. These are the next hard skills, and we will also upskill you. This is typical to European values, leaving no one behind, which I think we should be really proud of. And then we have the other group that kind of are generalists, and they just love, shiny things. They go everywhere. To keep those, you have to have the big visions, so they're, there for the long term. And then you have to keep the space open for both to talk, because we need both. And I totally agree with you. Like, disruption can truly come from within with the right leadership in place.
And I think leadership, I mean, I'd like to stick to that just for a minute or two, because leadership is part of the equation. But that doesn't always have to mean that it's the management who's also, because even leadership is getting decentralized, i.e. it's not the hierarchy, or leadership is transitioning into, a visionary, and then people need to implement that. So Jens, if I start with you, what's your experience? Is leadership growing into a different way of leading or envisioning for a company, or is that sort of not really?
I think it's a very good question, and I think there are things here. Märtha was referring to that one. We talked about it here. That needs to be changed. I think that the looping, the feedback looping, how you treat and inspire movement instead of fully accuracy, I think that is very, very relevant. But also with respect, and this is like the billion-dollar question, okay? These leaders that are out there now have been educated in one school, right? As I told you, we have an organizational system, an accounting system, which is legislation-based as well. We need to think of how do you use that in this way? How do you connect these parts? And it's a challenging act, but it for sure will be different. But I think if I look to the clients I'm working with, there are so many talented people out there. What we can do is try to inspire these people, release the power of these people. I bet they have much more knowledge than they believe in, right? So I think that is the most critical part. And then I'm happy to be in a Nordic country. We are a little bit more consensus-driven and more open and transparent to this towards if we compare to other countries, maybe.
Very well put. I want to soon take up John, but and while you're coming up, John, to see if we have any questions, I just want to pull a poll with our viewers. And the question is, what do you see as your biggest challenge for reaching your sustainability targets or goals? So what do you see as your biggest challenge? I mean, there might be something in addition to this, but what we've concluded to is lack of top management commitment, lack of digitalization tools, lack of clear targets. Let's see what the answers are. In the meantime, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, we have plenty.
Oh,
and
good.
I'm going to start with a
shoot.
potential crowd divider, which is a core element question. Who should be the first mover, industry or consumer?
And you have to choose.
And I have to choose?
They didn't specify, but
Okay.
to make it interesting, you could choose.
Yeah, okay. I just start off. I say industry. Because I think that, the consumer will get there. They are already there, I would say, many of them. If we can push more of the industry, that's much better.
Anyone else?
I would say crowd, because crowd altogether are also contributing on the industry or part of the industry. So we should all influence on that one.
I think we should include politicians also.
But are they people? Are they consumers?
Are they people?
Yes.
Are they consumers in a sense in this? Consumers, yes, but politicians and Märtha?
My mind says industry, my heart says crowd.
Yeah.
I want crowd to feel that, one person actually can make a difference with the power, with their purchasing power. So I'm going to go with the heart, crowd.
Thank you.
Good question.
Let's move to the next one then. What would you say are key factors when building a sustainability business case that you want to present for key stakeholders in your own business?
Good one. Who wants to catch that one? Sorry?
I can start.
Yes.
Yes. So for us, of course, it is this carbon footprint. So how can we reduce that one? And the kind of key thing is that, what that is part of our business case calculations already. So if we implement this idea, how much will it affect on the environment? So that is there already, and we are calculating it.
So let's take some more questions, and also maybe we can pull the result at the same time. Time always flies when you're getting into interesting discussions. Okay, so I would say lack of clear targets, but that's very interesting because that's a bit what we're tying into the conversation. You need to have, visualize your targets, and then it's lack of top management commitment, and then lack of digitalization tools. So, we found sort of the Achilles heels, and now it's more addressing how we can turn them around. But any more good questions?
Yes, I have one final quite ambitious question that is turned for everyone here. Any final advice that each of you wants to give to our very mixed audience going through the journey towards more sustainable operations and living?